The sun hung low over the endless salt flats, turning the cracked earth into a shimmering mirror of white and gold. Dust devils swirled lazily in the distance, carrying the faint tang of brine and exhaust from the highway that sliced through this forsaken stretch of nowhere. At the lone rest stop, a cluster of weathered pumps, a dingy diner, and a few picnic tables scarred by years of wind and neglect, a boy sat alone on the curb. He was 14, maybe, with dirt-streaked cheeks and eyes wide as shattered glass. Elias Moore clutched a faded backpack to his chest, his small frame trembling not from the chill creeping in with twilight, but from something deeper, something that silenced him entirely. No words escaped his lips. He hadn't spoken since the night his world fractured, but his fingers twitched, urgent, as if begging the air to carry a message no one could hear. Rider Locke Benton pulled his rumbling Harley to a stop at the pump, the engine's growl fading into a low purr before dying altogether. At 43, he was a man carved from the road, broad shoulders etched with faded tattoos, a salt and pepper beard, framing a face lined by too many sunsets and too few answers. His leather vest bore the patch of iron promise, the biker crew that had become his anchor after the wars that claimed his blood family. He wiped sweat from his brow, the metallic scent of hot oil mingling with the dry bite of salt in the air. Ryder had been riding aimlessly for hours, chasing ghosts from a promise he'd buried deep, to a young soldier named Caleb Moore, Elias's brother, who'd saved his life in a forgotten corner of the world. "If danger ever speaks in silence," Caleb had whispered during their last patrol, teaching him a rhythmic code tapped out on gear or skin, a sequence only their rescue unit knew, a lifeline for the voiceless. Ryder had nodded then, sealing it with a grip on Caleb's shoulder, but promises like that faded with time, or so he'd told himself. As he unscrewed the gas cap, a shadow shifted at his periphery. The boy, Elias, had risen, his backpack slung over one shoulder, and approached with the hesitant grace of a deer sensing a trap. No plea in his eyes, just raw desperation. Ryder paused, his hand hovering over the pump. Kids like this dotted the highways, runaways or strays from broken homes, but this one carried a weight that tugged at old instincts. Elias stopped inches from the bike, his gaze locking onto Ryder's. Then, without a sound, the boy's fingers drummed against the gas tank. Tap, tap, pause, tap, 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 pause, tap. The rhythm sliced through the quiet like a blade. 4173. Ryder's blood ran cold. It was the code. Unmistakable. Emergency. Survivors only. He straightened slowly, the pump forgotten, as Elias's hands continued, spelling out fragments in the air. Cargo, brother, gone. The boy's face crumpled, tears carving clean paths through the grime. Ryder's mind raced back. Caleb, vanishing months after mustering out, whispers of him poking into shady halls along these desolate routes. Irregular shipments, he'd said in a final frantic call to Ryder. Trucks rumbling through the night, guarded by shadows that reeked of corruption. "Watch for Elias if I'm not there," Caleb had urged. "He knows the code. Promise me, Locke." And Ryder had, even as the line went dead. "You his brother?" Ryder asked, voice gravel rough, kneeling to Elias's level. The boy nodded fiercely, pulling a crumpled photo from his pocket. Caleb in fatigues, grinning beside a younger Elias. Ryder's chest tightened. This wasn't coincidence. It was the past, clawing its way back, demanding payment. He glanced around the rest stop. Empty, save for a distant trucker nursing coffee inside, the highway humming with oblivious traffic. Whatever Caleb had uncovered, it had swallowed him whole, leaving this mute messenger in its wake. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. Ryder placed a steady hand on Elias's shoulder, feeling the boy's tremor ease just a fraction. "All right, kid. We're getting you safe." He didn't know the full story yet, but the code was a flare in the dark, pulling him into the fray. With a nod toward his bike, Ryder helped Elias onto the passenger seat, securing the backpack like it held state secrets. The engine roared to life again, a thunderous vow against the encroaching dusk. As they peeled away from the pumps, tires kicking up salt dust that glittered like fallen stars, Ryder keyed his comms, a discreet earpiece linked to Iron Promise's network. "Hawk, you copy? Got a ghost from the old unit. Code tapped out by a kid. Caleb Moore's brother. Something's moving on the flats tonight." Static crackled. Then Hawk's voice, steady as iron. "Lock! Damn! Rally the Promise! We're on it!" Iron Promise wasn't just a club. It was a brotherhood forged in fire. Veterans and wanderers bound by oaths that outlasted badges and borders. They'd shut down threats before, corrupt hauls masquerading as legit freight, preying on the vulnerable. But this felt personal, a thread from Ryder's scarred history unraveling into the present. The highway stretched ahead, a ribbon of asphalt flanked by the vast, unforgiving white. Elias clung to Ryder's back, his silence louder than any scream. Trucks barreled past, their trailers humming with hidden loads, crates that might hold more than goods, echoes of Caleb's warnings. Ryder's grip tightened on the handlebars, the wind whipping at his face like a challenge. He'd walked away from promises once, after the losses that hollowed him out, his wife gone to illness, his squad scattered to the winds. But this was redemption knocking, quiet and insistent, miles blurred as Ryder wove through sparse traffic, his mind mapping the route. The salt flats converged on a narrow pass up ahead, a choke point where shipments funneled like veins to a corrupt heart. If Caleb had been right, those trucks weren't carrying produce or parts. They masked something darker, something that silenced witnesses like him. Elias's tapping had been the spark. Now Iron Promise would fan it into a blaze. Ryder's radio buzzed again. Coordinates incoming, a plan unfolding. "Safety inspection," Hawk confirmed. "Lawful, clean. We'll block the highway, force them to stop." As the first stars pricked the sky, Ryder felt the weight of the boy behind him, a fragile trust that mirrored his own buried vows. The road curved toward the flats, the air growing thicker with the promise of confrontation. No guns, no fury, just the unyielding honor of men who kept their word. Elias's secret code had bridged the silence, and in its echo, Ryder found his purpose reignited. The highway loomed unsuspecting. As the convoy's distant rumble began to build, a wall of leather and loyalty rolling in to answer the call. The rumble of approaching engines grew from a whisper to a roar, vibrating through the asphalt like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Ryder glanced in his rearview mirror, catching the first glints of chrome under the emerging stars, headlights piercing the twilight haze. A phalanx of Harleys cresting the horizon. Iron Promise was mobilizing, their formation tight and purposeful, shadows lengthening across the salt flats as they closed the gap. Elias's arms tightened around Ryder's waist, the boy's breath warm against his back, a silent anchor in the gathering storm. The wind carried the sharp scent of cooling metal and distant rain, whipping Ryder's hair as he throttled down, easing toward the narrow pass where the highway funneled into a single lane flanked by sheer white cliffs. Hawk Daniels led the convoy, his massive frame cutting through the air on a custom chopper painted matte black, the Iron Promise emblem, a clenched fist around a broken chain, gleaming faintly. At 52, Hawk was the unyielding core of the crew, a former combat medic whose steady hands had stitched more than wounds. He'd mended fractured oaths in the dead of night. He'd known Caleb Moore, too, back when they all shared foxholes and fleeting hopes. As the bikes fanned out, engines sinking in a low, harmonious growl, Hawk pulled alongside Ryder, his voice cutting through the comms like a blade. "Locke, talk to me." "The kid's code. It's the old survivor signal, right? 4173? Ryder nodded, though Hawk couldn't see it. his eyes scanning the road ahead where taillights of semi-trucks dotted the distance like fireflies in the gloom. "Yeah, Elias tapped it clean. Says his brother's gone. Disappeared after sniffing around these routes. Cargo, that's not what it seems. Caleb called me months back, voice shaking. Said he'd seen transfers at night, guards who didn't look like truckers, promised I'd watch for the boy if things went south." The words hung heavy, tasting of regret and resolve. Ryder had let that call fade into the static of his life, burying it under miles of blacktop and the ache of his own losses. But now, with Elias's fingers still echoing the rhythm against his vest, the promise resurfaced, raw and demanding. Elias shifted, his head turning to watch the convoy swell. 20, 30 riders now, a rolling testament to loyalty forged not in blood, but in choice. Among them rode Lena Sparks Torres, a wiry ex-mechanic in her 30s, with grease-stained knuckles and eyes that missed nothing. She'd patched up more than engines for the crew, her quick mind spotting the undercurrents of deceit in a world that thrived on lies. Beside her thundered Jax, a burly veteran whose laugh could boom like thunder, but whose silence in the face of injustice cut deeper. They were family, pieced together from the wreckage of wars and wanderings, bound by the Iron Promise Creed, honor the word, shield the silent. As they neared the pass, Hawk signaled a slowdown, the convoy decelerating in unison, a choreographed dance of steel and will. Ryder pulled to the shoulder, gravel crunching under his tires, and helped Elias dismount. The boy's feet hit the ground with a soft thud, his wide eyes reflecting the constellation of bike lights now arraying like sentinels. "Stay close," Ryder murmured, his hand lingering on the kid's shoulder. Elias nodded, clutching his backpack tighter, the photo of Caleb peeking from its flap like a talisman. In the distance, the first truck rumbled into view, its trailer swaying under the weight of unseen burdens, headlights slicing the dark. Hawk dismounted with a grunt, his boots kicking up puffs of salt dust that shimmered in the beams. He approached Elias slowly, kneeling as Ryder had, his face softening under the beard streaked with silver. "Hey, little brother, I'm Hawk. Your code. It reached us. Means Caleb trusted you with it. And that's no small thing." Elias's gaze flickered with something like relief, his fingers twitching as if debating another tap. But he held back, scanning the horizon where more trucks loomed. Their engines a monotonous drone against the night's quiet. The plan unfolded with precision, no chaos, just the quiet efficiency of men who'd faced worse than shadows on a road. Hawk keyed his comms to the broader network, voice calm and authoritative. "This is Iron Promise, coordinating with Highway Patrol for a routine safety check. Be advised, full stop at mile marker 47. All vehicles halt for inspection." It was lawful above board, a favor called in from old contacts, the kind of leverage that came from years of quiet good deeds. No badges needed when honor spoke louder. The crew positioned themselves strategically, bikes blocking access points, flares popping to life in crimson bursts, casting an eerie glow over the flats. Truckers would grumble, but they'd comply. The alternative was a ticket or worse, exposure. Ryder watched as the lead semi braked hard, tires screeching faintly, its driver leaning out with a curse swallowed by the wind. Elias tensed beside him, pointing urgently toward the trailer's undercarriage. Seams that didn't match, shadows that hinted at hidden compartments. Ryder's jaw set, memories flooding back. Caleb's voice on that last call, laced with fear. "They're moving people, Locke, not goods. Kids, runaways, folks who vanish without a trace. I got too close." The words had haunted Ryder, dismissed as paranoia until now. This wasn't just cargo. It was a vein of corruption pulsing through the veins of the forgotten highways, preying on the voiceless like Elias. Sparks sidled up, her toolkit slung over one shoulder, eyes narrowing at the truck. "Let me take a look under there. If it's rigged wrong, we'll know." She moved with the grace of someone who'd dismantled bombs in basements, her flashlight beam dancing over welds and locks. Jax flanked her, a human shield of quiet strength, while Hawk coordinated the growing line of halted vehicles, 5 now, then 10. The highway transforming into a stalled river under the indifferent stars. Elias tugged at Ryder's sleeve, his free hand signing rapidly. Danger, now. Ryder translated for Hawk, the weight of the boy's trust pressing like a brand. This intervention wasn't vengeance. It was justice, poetic and unyielding, forcing the hidden into the light. As sparks pried open a panel, revealing glimpses of cramped darkness within, forms huddled, eyes wide with the same terror Elias knew, Ryder felt the promise solidify. Caleb's silence had found its echo, and in answering it, Ryder reclaimed a piece of his fractured soul. The air thickened with tension, the scent of rubber and fear mingling with the eternal brine. Flares hissed, casting long shadows that danced like spectres across the salt. Hawk's voice rose over the comms. Patrols en route. Hold steady. But Ryder knew the real hold was in the creed, the unbreaking line of brothers and sisters who'd chosen this path, turning personal scars into collective armor. Elias leaned into him, a small victory in the mute press of his shoulder. The highway, once a river of indifference, now stood still, bearing witness to a promise fulfilled. And now I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The flare's crimson glow painted the salt flats in strokes of blood and fire, turning the stalled highway into a frozen tableau of steel and suspicion. Ryder stood firm beside Elias, the boy's small hand gripping the edge of his vest like a lifeline, as sparks worked methodically under the lead truck's trailer. Her flashlight beam cut through the gloom, illuminating welds that gleamed unnaturally, edges too precise for standard freight. The air hummed with the low murmur of idling engines and the occasional grumble from drivers peering from their cabs. But beneath it all lingered the sharp tang of fear, sweat-soaked and metallic, carried on the breeze from the hidden compartments. Jax loomed nearby, his massive arms crossed, a silent deterrent to any who might think to interfere. Iron Promise's formation held like a dam against the flow. Bikes angled to seal the pass, their riders dismounted and vigilant, eyes scanning the horizon for reinforcements or retreat. Hawk paced the shoulder, his radio crackling with updates from the fringes. Patrols 5 minutes out, he confirmed to Ryder, voice low and steady, the kind that anchored chaos without raising to it. But we can't wait if it's urgent. Sparks, what you got? She emerged from beneath the trailer, wiping her hands on her jeans, her face etched with the quiet fury of someone who'd seen too many machines hide too many sins. Compartments all right, sealed tight but not factory. Locks look aftermarket, easy to pop if we had cause. And there's movement inside, faint but real. Folks tucked away, breathing shallow. Her words landed like stones in still water, rippling through the crew. No one spoke of specifics. They didn't need to. The code Elias had tapped wasn't just a signal. It was a summons to this moment where silence demanded to be broken. Elias's eyes widened, his free hand fluttering in rapid signs. Brother saw this, warned them. Ryder translated softly, his throat tight with the echo of Caleb's last words. The brother who'd taught the boy the rhythm, who'd pressed that faded photo into his palm before vanishing into these same flats. Caleb had been the light in Elias's world, pulling him from a home fractured by absence, teaching him to communicate when words failed. Now that light flickered in the shadows of these trucks, and Ryder felt the weight of his unkept vigil pressing down, heavier than the desert night. He'd ridden these roads to escape such burdens after the war stole his squad and his wife faded under the slow siege of illness. But promises didn't dissolve in dust. They waited, patient as the salt crusting the earth. A driver from the second truck clambered down, his face flushed under the brim of a worn cap, boots thudding against the asphalt. "What's this about?" "I got a schedule," perishables in here." His voice carried an edge, too sharp for innocence, eyes darting to the flares and the ring of leather-clad figures. Hawk stepped forward, unhurried, his presence alone enough to still the man's bluster. "Routine check, sir. Safety first. We'll have you moving soon." But as Hawk spoke, Lena Sparks circled the cab, her gaze catching on a subtle emblem sticker half peeled from the door. A coiled serpent, innocuous to most, but a marker in their world for halls that skirted the edges of the law. She'd seen it before, on routes where goods turned to ghosts, where the vulnerable were shuttled like cargo to unseen fates. Ryder knelt beside Elias, the boy's trembling easing into a determined stillness. "You did good, kid. Your taps, they brought us here." Elias met his eyes, nodding once, then pointed again toward the trailer, his finger tracing an invisible path. Ryder followed the gesture, spotting a glint in the underbrush, a discarded tag, fluttering like a white flag in the wind. He retrieved it carefully, the paper crisp and stamped with coordinates that matched Caleb's final call. A warehouse on the flat's edge, where night transfers blurred the line between commerce and concealment. The realization hit like a throttle twist. This wasn't random. It was a thread in a larger web, one Caleb had tugged until it yanked him under. Ryder pocketed the tag, his resolve hardening. Iron Promise didn't ride for glory. They moved for the forgotten, turning personal oaths into collective shields. Jax moved in then, his voice a rumble like distant thunder. "More trucks piling up behind. Patrol's radio says they're buying us time, but we need to document this clean." He pulled a small camera from his saddlebag, snapping shots of the trailer's seams, the unnatural sway of its load. The crew fanned out, methodical as a patrol in hostile territory, one rider checking manifests with feigned casualness, another noting license plates under the guise of logging delays. Lena popped a lock with a tool that whispered rather than clanged, easing a panel just enough to confirm what shadows suggested. Huddled forms, traces of distress in the air, lives rerouted without consent. No chaos erupted. The intervention was a quiet siege, justice uncoiling like the dawn over the flats. From the convoy's rear, a new rumble joined the fray, not threat, but ally. Maria Echo Ruiz pulled up on her sleek touring bike, her nursing kit strapped secure. At 40, she was the crew's quiet healer, a veteran whose hands had steadied more than the wounded. She'd bound the fractures in their chosen family after losses that mirrored Ryder's own. "Heard the call," she said, dismounting with fluid grace, her dark hair whipping in the wind. "If anyone's hurt in there, I'll see to it." She approached Elias first, offering a gentle smile that coaxed a faint echo from the boy, a tentative sign of thanks. Echo had known Caleb too, patched him up once after a skirmish, heard his dreams of a life beyond the uniform. "Your brother's promise, it lives in you," she murmured, her words a balm against the night's chill. As patrol lights crested the horizon, blue and red pulsing like a heartbeat, Hawk signaled the crew to hold positions. The lead truck's driver shifted uneasily, his earlier bluster crumbling under the weight of exposure. "You don't know what you're messing with," he muttered, but Hawk's steady gaze silenced him. This was the poetry of their justice, not fists or fury, but the unyielding light of truth piercing the veil. Ryder felt Elias lean closer, the boy's silence now a shared vigil. As Echo coordinated with arriving officers, lawful hands extending the reach of the code. The first extraction began smoothly, figures emerging into the flare light, blinking against the sudden freedom. Whispers of relief cut the tension, mingling with the salt-scented breeze. Ryder watched, the tag burning in his pocket like a map to deeper shadows. Caleb's disappearance wasn't isolated. It traced back to that warehouse, to guardians who silenced threats with absence. But tonight, the highway's blockade had cracked the facade, a testament to loyalty that spanned years and scars. Iron Promise stood as one, their engines a low chorus of affirmation, while Elias's eyes, for the first time, held a spark of hope amid the white expanse. Tension coiled tighter as the patrol cruisers rolled to a halt, their sirens fading into the night's vast hush. Officers disembarked, clipboards in hand, but their nods to Hawk spoke of alliances forged in quieter battles. Ryder's mind raced ahead, the coordinates a beacon pulling him toward the warehouse under cover of dawn. Elias's code had halted the flow, but the source pulsed on, demanding more than a stop. It craved reckoning. As the crew assisted in the careful unraveling of secrets from the trailers, Ryder vowed silently, Caleb's promise would not end in silence. The flats stretched endless, but in their midst honor burned bright, a fire no darkness could quench. The patrol lights bathed the salt flats in a staccato pulse of blue and red, casting elongated shadows that twisted like accusations across the stalled highway. Ryder shielded Elias from the glare, the boy's face half hidden against his side, as officers moved in with measured steps, their radios crackling softly against the wind's low moan. The air hung heavy with the mingled scents of overheated brakes and the faint, acrid bite of fear sweat from the trailer's hidden passengers. Hawk exchanged a brief word with the lead officer, a grizzled veteran named Harlan, whose weathered face carried the same quiet scars as the Iron Promise riders. No formalities wasted. Harlan's team had been briefed through back channels, the kind built on favors repaid in the dead of night. "We'll handle the manifests," Harlan said, his voice a gravel whisper. "You all keep eyes open for anything off script." Ryder nodded, his hand steady on Elias's shoulder, feeling the subtle tremor that betrayed the boy's unvoiced storm. The code had brought them here, but unraveling the threads demanded more than steel and resolve. It required the delicate precision of trust, pieced together from fragments of the past. Sparks worked alongside an officer now, her tools glinting as she documented the trailer's anomalies. Panels that yielded too easily, compartments lined with makeshift padding that muffled more than sound. Whispers emerged from the depths, grateful murmurs from those freed, their forms emerging into the flare light like ghosts reclaiming substance. A young woman clutched a shawl around her shoulders, eyes darting until Echo guided her to a cruiser, offering water and a calm assurance that needed no words. These weren't just cargo. They were lives, rerouted through shadows, echoes of the vulnerabilities Caleb had sworn to shield. Elias pulled away slightly, his gaze fixed on the lead truck's cab, where the driver sat rigid. Hands white-knuckled on the wheel. The man's earlier defiance had crumbled into a sullen stare, but Ryder caught the flicker, a coded glance toward the rear view, as if signaling to unseen allies. "Something's not right," Ryder murmured to Hawk, who stood nearby, arms crossed like an unbreakable barrier. The coordinates from the discarded tag burned in Ryder's pocket, mapping a path to the warehouse where Caleb's trail likely ended. That final call replayed in his mind, Caleb's voice strained over static, describing night halls that fed a network of concealment, preying on the displaced and the desperate. "They're organized, Locke, not lone wolves, got pull with locals who look the other way." Ryder had dismissed it then, lost in his own haze of grief, but now it sharpened into focus, a blade honed by Elias's silent plea. Jax lumbered over, his bulk parting the small crowd of crew and officers with effortless authority. "Check the plates on the tail-enders," he rumbled, voice low to avoid carrying. "Two match a fleet out of the Flats industrial zone, same serpent-marked sparks spotted. If Caleb crossed them, this blockade just lit a fuse." His words stirred the air, carrying the weight of shared history. Jax had pulled Caleb from a ditch once, back when the unit was more family than ranks, binding them with oaths whispered under firelit skies. Iron Promise thrived on such bonds, a chosen kin, where blood ties paled against the steel of loyalty. Ryder glanced at Elias, who signed urgently, "More coming, hurry." The boy had learned to read the rhythms of danger from his brother, tapping out warnings in the quiet hours before Caleb vanished. Hawk absorbed it all, his eyes narrowing against the patrol beams. We document, we hand off clean. But Locke, you and the kid, get to that warehouse. Echo, Sparks, you're with. Rest, hold the line till Harlan clears it. No argument. The crew moved like a well-oiled machine, engines coughing to life in staggered bursts, the sound a defiant symphony against the flat's eerie silence. Ryder lifted Elias onto his bike, the boy's weight a grounding force as they peeled away from the chaos, tires humming over the asphalt toward the coordinates pull. The highway receded behind them, a ribbon unfurling into the dark, flanked by the endless white that gleamed faintly under the moon's indifferent gaze. Wind rushed past, carrying the distant echo of voices, and the sharp scent of salt stirred anew. Miles slipped by, in tense quiet, the convoy of 4 bikes slicing through the night like arrows loosed from a bow. Echo rode point, her nursing kit secure, while Sparks flanked Ryder, her sharp eyes scanning for tails. Elias clung tight, his breath sinking with the engine's throb, as if the rhythm mirrored the code that started it all. Ryder's thoughts churned. The promise to Caleb wasn't just words. It was a lifeline extended across years, from foxholes to these forsaken roots. He'd failed once, letting loss carve him hollow after his wife's quiet fade and the squad's scattering. But Elias's taps had reignited it, a spark demanding fuel. The warehouse loomed in his mind's eye, a squat silhouette against the horizon, ringed by chain link and the ghosts of forgotten industry. As they crested a low rise, the structure came into view. Floodlights harsh against the dark, casting pools of yellow that swallowed shadows whole. Trucks idled in the yard, their forms hulking sentinels, while figures moved with purposeful haste, loading, unloading, voices muffled but urgent. Ryder killed the engine at the perimeter, the sudden silence amplifying the crunch of gravel under boots. Elias dismounted first, pointing toward a side door where a faint scuffle suggested resistance. Sparks knelt, examining fresh tire tracks that veered off into the dunes. Recent. They're shifting whatever's here. Fast. Echo scanned the group, her healer's instinct picking up the undercurrents, a limp in one guard's step, the hurried gestures that spoke of concealment. They advanced as a unit. No rash charges, just the measured approach of those who'd learned patience in worse crucibles. Ryder's hand brushed Elias's, a silent vow amid the tension. This was the heart of it. Caleb's disappearance traced to these walls, where corruption masqueraded as commerce, silencing threats with calculated absence. A guard rounded the corner, spotting them, his shout cut short by Hawk's prearranged signal. A flare from the highway crew, drawing distant sirens. Chaos rippled through the yard, doors slamming as figures scattered, but Ryder pushed forward. Elias at his side, toward the door the boy indicated. Inside, the air shifted, stale and thick with the must of disuse, lit by bare bulbs that buzzed like trapped insects. Crates lined the walls, some pried open to reveal not goods, but traces of hurried evacuation, blankets rumpled, a child's toy discarded in haste. Elias froze, signing frantically, "Here, brother was here." Ryder's pulse thrummed, the promise coiling tighter. They weren't alone. Footsteps echoed from deeper within, a confrontation brewing in the dim. Echo whispered, "Stay sharp. Could be hurt ones hiding." Sparks nodded, toolkit ready, as they pressed on, the warehouse's secrets unfolding like a map to redemption. The pursuit led to a back room, door ajar, where dim light spilled from a single lamp. Ryder eased it open, Elias peering past his leg, and there, slumped against crates, bound but breathing, was a figure whose face struck like lightning. Caleb Moore, gaunt and marked by ordeal, but alive. His eyes, hazy at first, sharpened on Elias, then Ryder. No words yet, just a weak nod that sealed the vow. Iron Promise's reach had pierced the veil, turning silence into salvation. Outside, sirens wailed closer, the web unraveling under the weight of honor kept. If this chapter stirred your sense of justice and loyalty, give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to hear stories of promises fulfilled. The dim bulb swung lazily from its cord, casting erratic shadows that danced across the warehouse's cluttered back room like uneasy specters. Ryder's breath caught, the air thick with the musty residue of damp concrete and faint traces of oil, as he took in the sight of Caleb Moore, alive, though the man's frame spoke of days or weeks endured in chains. Ropes bit into Caleb's wrists, raw and chafed, his fatigues torn and dusted with the same white grit that clung to everything in the flats. Elias gasped silently, a sharp intake that broke the hush, his small body surging forward before Ryder's arm gently barred him. The boy's eyes brimmed, wide with a mix of disbelief and the raw ache of reunion, his fingers twitching as if to tap out the joy that words couldn't hold. Caleb's gaze lifted, hazy from whatever ordeal had dimmed it, locking first on Elias with a flicker of fierce protectiveness, then shifting to Ryder. Recognition dawned slowly, carving lines deeper into his gaunt face, and he managed a nod, subtle but weighted, like the oaths they'd shared under distant skies. No strength for more, not yet. His lips parted in a dry rasp, but only air escaped. Ryder moved swiftly, kneeling to slice through the bonds with a multi-tool from his belt, the blade whispering against the fibers. "Easy, brother," he murmured, the voice low and steady, the gravel of it masking the storm inside. This was the promise incarnate, Caleb's final plea answered not in vengeance, but in the quiet act of pulling a man from the brink. Echo slipped past the doorframe, her healer's kit already open, the soft click of latches echoing in the confined space. She assessed Caleb with practiced calm, her hands gentle as she checked for immediate threats, swollen joints, shallow breaths that hinted at ribs, bruised but not broken. "He's stable," she said, glancing at Ryder, her dark eyes reflecting the lamp's feeble glow. "Dehydrated, beaten down, but he'll walk out of here." Sparks lingered at the threshold, her silhouette framed by the corridor's gloom, toolkit in hand as she scanned for traps or alarms. The warehouse hummed faintly beyond, the distant clatter of fleeing guards fading under the rising wail of sirens, a symphony of exposure that Iron Promise had orchestrated from the highway's edge. Elias dropped to his knees beside his brother, his hands signing in a flurry, safe, home, promise. Caleb's bound legs freed, he reached out, cupping the boy's face with trembling palms, thumbs tracing the dirt-streaked cheeks. A tear escaped Caleb's eye, carving a path through the grime, and in that moment, the room shrank to just them, the unbreakable thread of blood and silence that had outlasted the shadows. Ryder stood back, giving space, but the sight twisted something deep in his chest. He'd carried Caleb's words like a phantom weight since that last call, the static-laced warning of a network that traded in human fragility, shuttling the lost through these desolate veins. Caleb had poked too deep, uncovering ledgers hidden in plain sight, manifests falsified for relief supplies that masked rerouted lives, funneled to buyers who paid in silence and threats. The guards here weren't mere hires, they were cogs in a machine greased by local indifference, one Caleb had jammed with his questions. Ryder's radio buzzed softly against his hip, Hawk's voice cutting through. "Lock, status? Patrols breaching the yard. We've got the line holding. Harlan's team is cataloguing the lot." The words grounded him, a reminder that this rescue wasn't solitary. Iron Promise's web of loyalty spanned the flats, from the blockade's unyielding riders to the allies who turned a blind eye into focused light. "Found him," Ryder replied, keeping his tone even. Alive! Echoes on it. We're extracting now. A pause, then Hawk's rumble. Good work. The kid's code. It saved more than one tonight. Elias looked up at that, his expression softening. The mute boy's burden lightening as the pieces aligned. He'd carried the rhythm across miles of fear, a silent flare that ignited the crew's oath. Sparks signaled from the door, her whisper urgent. Movement outside, guards circling back, but patrols are closing. We go now. Ryder helped Caleb to his feet, the man's weight leaning heavy but willing, arms slung over his shoulder in a grip that echoed their old unit's camaraderie. Echo supported from the other side, her strength belying her frame, while Elias flanked them, backpack clutched like armor. They moved as one through the corridor, footsteps muffled on the gritty floor, the air growing cooler as they neared the side exit. Floodlights from the yard pierced the cracks, painting stripes of yellow across the walls, and the scent of rain-touched salt seeped in, a promise of cleansing on the wind. Outside, the chaos unfolded in controlled waves. Patrol cruisers ringed the perimeter, their beams sweeping the dunes where guards had scattered like smoke. Jax's silhouette loomed near a stack of crates, directing officers toward a hidden cache, documents fluttering in the breeze, evidence of the web's sprawl. One sheet caught Ryder's eye as they passed. A ledger page, names blurred but patterns clear, linking the highway halls to this hub. Caleb had been right. It was organized, insidious, preying on the fringes where authority frayed. But tonight, that fraying became a noose, tightened by the crew's unyielding honor. A guard emerged from the shadows, burly and desperate, hand fumbling toward a concealed weapon. Jax intercepted with a single fluid motion, disarming without harm, pinning the man for Harlan's team. No shots fired, no blood spilled. Iron Promise's justice was a scalpel, not a hammer, carving truth from deception. Caleb staggered into the open air, gulping the night like renewal, his eyes scanning the array of bikes and badges. You came, he rasped finally, voice cracking like dry earth. Ryder met his gaze, the nod from the room mirrored back. Promised I would. For the silence. Elias beamed silently, signing to his brother with renewed vigor, the family's fracture mending under the stars. Echo guided Caleb toward an ambulance that had arrived in the fray, its lights a softer counterpoint to the cruiser's pulse. Sparks fell in beside Ryder, her voice a low thread. Warehouse is clean, more leads for Harlan, but this network, it runs deeper. Caleb might know paths we don't. The implication hung. Redemption wasn't a single rescue, but a chain of fulfillments, each link forged in the fire of kept words. As the crew regrouped, engines rumbling to life in the yard's vast hush, Ryder felt the weight shift, from burden to purpose. The flats stretched beyond, white and unforgiving, but scarred now with the mark of loyalty. Caleb's weak wave from the ambulance was a seal on the vow, Elias's hand in his a bridge to what came next. Sirens faded into the distance, carrying secrets into daylight, while Iron Promise rode out as guardians, their thunder a quiet roar against the dawn's first blush. The promise, once buried, now breathed free, binding scars into strength. The dawn crept over the salt flats like a reluctant witness, painting the horizon in pale strokes of pink and gold that clashed against the lingering blue of patrol lights. Ryder throttled his Harley gently, the engine's low rumble a soothing counterpoint to the chaos they'd left behind at the warehouse. Elias rode pillion, his small frame pressed close, no longer trembling but holding steady, as if the reunion with Caleb had anchored him against the wind's insistent tug. The air carried the crisp bite of morning brine, mingled with the faint, acrid echo of exhaust from the dispersing cruisers. Iron Promise's convoy stretched ahead and behind, a loose formation of chrome and leather weaving through the awakening landscape toward a safe haven on the flat's edge. a nondescript outpost where they'd regroup and piece together the fragments of the night. Caleb rode with Echo in the lead van, an unmarked rig borrowed from Harlan's contacts, its tires humming over the cracked asphalt as it ferried him toward medical care. Ryder glanced back occasionally, catching glimpses of the vehicle's taillights fading into the haze, a mobile sanctuary for the man whose silence had nearly claimed him. The rescue had cracked the warehouse's facade, yielding crates of falsified papers and maps tracing routes that snaked beyond the highways, veins feeding a network that preyed on the overlooked. Caleb's rasped account, pieced together in the ambulance's dim interior, painted a picture of coercion. Guards who'd cornered him after his questions grew too pointed, binding him in that back room as a warning to others who pried. No overt threats, just the calculated isolation that broke spirits without a trace. Hawk pulled alongside Ryder at a fork in the road, his chopper's growl syncing briefly with the Harley's before he keyed the comms. Harlan's got the yard locked down. Ledgers showed ties to a front operation in the industrial sprawl, calls itself Desert Freight, but it's a shell for rerouting the vulnerable. Caleb confirmed it. They targeted runaways, folks down on their luck, vanishing them into labor pools or worse. He got too close after spotting a transfer near Elias's old neighborhood. Hawk's voice held the steady timbre of a man who'd stitched wounds in the field, now mending the broader fractures of injustice. At his core, Hawk embodied the creed, honor as the quiet force that outlasted corruption's bluster. Ryder nodded, the wind whipping his beard, tasting salt on his lips. Kid's code pulled us in, but this runs deep. Caleb mentioned a name, Vargas, the overseer. Slippery, with pull in the local circuits. Elias shifted behind him, his hand tapping lightly on Ryder's side, not the emergency rhythm, but a softer pattern, like gratitude woven into Morse. Ryder reached back briefly, a paternal squeeze that spoke volumes in the rush of air. The boy had bridged worlds with his silence, turning a forgotten vow into a lifeline that saved not just his brother, but echoes of others lost in the flat's vast anonymity. Memories surfaced unbidden, Ryder's own fractures, the squad's dissolution after a mission gone sideways, his wife's hand growing cold in his during those final hospital vigils. He'd ridden to numb it all, but Iron Promise had rebuilt him, piece by scarred piece, into something unbreakable. This ride, with Elias's trust warming his back, who felt like the final weld. The outpost emerged from the dunes, a low-slung bunker of weathered concrete, ringed by scrub and overlooked by the endless white. Sparks and Jacks had arrived ahead, their bikes parked in a defensive arc, toolkits and gear arrayed on a makeshift table under a sagging awning. The scent of fresh coffee mingled with engine grease as the crew dismounted, the morning sun glinting off metal surfaces like scattered coins. Echo's van pulled in last, Caleb emerging on unsteady legs, supported by her and a medic from Harlan's team. His face, cleaned of grime, revealed bruises fading to yellow, eyes clearer now with hydration and rest. Elias bolted to him, the brothers colliding in a wordless embrace. Caleb's arms enveloping the boy with a fierceness that needed no voice. Ryder approached slowly, clapping Caleb on the shoulder, the contact grounding them both in the shared history of foxholes and faded photos. "You held on. That's more than most." Caleb managed a faint smile, his voice still rough but gaining strength. Elias. He remembered the code. Taught him young, in case the world turned quiet on us. The words hung, laced with the pain of their fractured home. Parents long gone, the brothers clinging to each other amid the grind of survival. Caleb's gaze sharpened, turning to the crew assembled around the table. Maps unrolled, notes scribbled from the warehouse hall. Vargas isn't done. He runs the Desert Freight from a compound deeper in, old mining site. Fortified. I saw manifests pointing there. Shipments reroute at dawn. If we hit now, we cut the head. Hawk studied the map, his finger tracing a dotted line through the dunes. Lawful play, coordinate with Harlan for a sweep. But we go in soft, expose without storming. The plan coalesced in murmurs, Sparks rigging a discreet tracker on a decoy route. Jax scouting the perimeter with his unerring eye for weak points, Echo prepping for any found in distress. Iron Promise wasn't an army, they were the unseen hand, leveraging oaths and alliances to dismantle webs without adding to the scars. Ryder felt the pull, the promise evolving from rescue to reckoning, a moral tide rising against the cynicism that let such shadows thrive. As the sun climbed, casting long shadows across the outpost, Caleb sat with Elias under the awning, the boy signing stories of the road while his brother listened, nodding. Ryder watched from afar, the scene a quiet balm amid the strategy. Vargas's network represented more than crime. It was the erosion of trust, the betrayal of the vulnerable by those sworn to protect. But here, in this chosen circle, loyalty rebuilt what corruption tore down. Sparks handed Ryder a comms unit, her eyes alight with purpose. Wheels up in 30, this ends today, for Caleb, for the kid, for all the silences we've answered. The engines stirred again, a chorus building as the crew mounted up, dust devils swirling in their wake. Ryder lifted Elias onto the bike once more, Caleb riding with Echo for the approach. The flats unfolded ahead, a canvas of redemption where promises found their echo. Tension hummed in the air, thick as the gathering heat, but beneath it lay the unyielding core, honor, silent and profound, turning personal vows into a legacy that scarred the darkness forever. The compound loomed in the distance, its silhouette a final challenge. As Iron Promise rolled toward the heart of the storm, the compound squatted in the heart of the dunes like a forgotten fortress, its chain-link perimeter sagging under years of wind-scoured neglect, floodlights flickering erratically against the climbing sun. Ryder eased his Harley to a halt on a rise overlooking the site, the engine's dying rumble swallowed by the vast hush of the salt flats. Elias dismounted beside him, his eyes fixed on the sprawl below. Rusted silos and loading bays, where trucks idled like wary beasts, their trailers casting long shadows that hid more than freight. The air shimmered with heat, carrying the dry rasp of shifting sand and the faint, oily tang of machinery at work. Iron Promise's convoy fanned out in a loose semicircle, bikes silent now, riders dismounting with the fluid precision of shadows merging into the landscape. Hawk signaled from his vantage, a subtle wave that coordinated their approach. No thunderous charge, just the measured creep of those who'd learned to dismantle threats from within. Caleb rode in Echo's van, parked at the rear, his recovery steady but guarded. The medic's care had steadied his breaths, but the fire in his eyes burned for closure. Ryder glanced back, catching Caleb's nod through the tinted glass, a silent affirmation of the vow that had pulled him from the warehouse's grip. Vargas's operation pulsed here, the nerve center Caleb had described, manifests routing the displaced through false fronts, vanishing them into labor chains or unseen fates, all under the guise of legitimate trade. It was the cynicism incarnate, preying on fractures in a world that looked away. Sparks knelt nearby, her toolkit open on the parched earth, rigging a small drone with a camera feed linked to their comms. Thermal shows movement inside the main bay, 6 heat signatures, plus vehicles prepping to roll. If we tag one outbound, Harlan's team can intercept clean. Her voice was a low thread, eyes sharp behind the screen's glow. Jax flanked her, his bulk a reassuring wall, scanning the perimeter through binoculars for sentries or weak points. Echo joined Ryder and Elias, her presence a calm anchor, checking the boy's backpack for water and essentials. "Stay with me if it heats up," she murmured to Elias, who nodded, his fingers brushing the faded photo of him and Caleb, a talisman against the rising tension. Ryder's pulse thrummed steady, the coordinates from the warehouse tag now etched in his mind like a scar. This was the culmination. Caleb's warnings, Elias's code, the highway blockade, all converging on this dusty heart. He'd buried promises before, after the war's toll and his wife's quiet surrender to illness, letting miles numb the edges. But iron promise had taught him otherwise, loyalty as the forge that reshaped loss into purpose. "We expose it," he said to the group, voice gravel rough against the wind. No shadows left for Vargas to slither into. They advanced in pairs, skirting the dune's contours, the sun baking the ground into a brittle crust that crunched faintly under boots. Elias stuck close to Ryder, his silence a vigilant companion, signing occasional alerts. Watch left, low profile. The boy's instincts, honed by Caleb's teachings, proved sharper than any radar. As they neared the fence, Sparks deployed the drone, its hum a whisper lost in the breeze, feeding live images to Hawk's tablet. Guards milling near a loading dock, crates stacked haphazardly, one bearing the serpent emblem that marked the web's reach. Hawk's voice crackled over comms. "Breach point at the east gate. Jax, you and Sparks cut the chain. Lock Elias, Echo, flank the bay. Caleb stays put till we clear." The plan unfolded like a well-rehearsed patrol. Lawful intent woven through every step. Document, disrupt, deliver to authorities waiting in the wings. Jax's bolt cutters sheared the links with a muffled snip, the gate swinging open on rusted hinges that groaned like a confession. They slipped inside, the compound's air thicker now, laced with the metallic bite of welding torches and the low murmur of voices from within. Vargas emerged from the bay like a spectre from the heat haze. A lean man in his 50s, suit rumpled and sweat-beaded, clipboard in hand as he barked orders to loaders. His eyes narrowed at the intruders, recognition flickering as Caleb's name hung unspoken in the air. "You don't belong here," he snarled, but the bluster faltered under Hawk's unyielding stare. No drawn weapons. Iron Promise's strength lay in exposure, not escalation. Sparks activated a recorder, capturing his evasion, while Jax blocked the exit, a human impasse. Ryder stepped forward, Elias at his side, the boy's presence a silent indictment. "Caleb Moore sent us," Ryder said, voice cutting clean. "Your routes end today." Vargas's face paled, the clipboard slipping as guards hesitated, hands hovering uncertainly. Echo moved past toward a side alcove where muffled sounds hinted at hidden holds, more lives tucked away, waiting for the light. She signaled back, clear but urgent. The drone's feed confirmed it. Compartments in the silos, thermal blooms of huddled forms. Harlan's patrol crested the dunes then, sirens a distant wail that swelled into command, cruisers fanning the perimeter. Vargas lunged for a radio, but Hawk's grip steadied him. Not harm, but restraint, the creed demanding justice over fury. The unraveling was swift and surgical. Officers swarmed the bay, manifests seized, crates pried to reveal the truth, falsified papers, traces of rerouted souls, ledgers linking Vargas to distant buyers. No violence erupted. The guards folded under the weight of evidence, Vargas's empire crumbling in the midday glare. Caleb emerged from the van, supported by Echo, his steps firmer now, locking eyes with the fallen overseer. "You thought silence would bury it," he rasped, Elias signing beside him in fierce punctuation. Vargas said nothing, the serpent's coil broken. As the sun peaked, casting a relentless white over the flats, Iron Promise stood witness while Harlan's team extracted the hidden, guiding them into waiting vehicles with quiet dignity. Ryder watched Elias embrace Caleb fully, the brothers' reunion a balm against the compound's stark lines. The boy had voiced the unvoiceable, his taps a bridge from peril to peace. Hawk clapped Ryder's shoulder, the gesture sealing their shared scars into legacy. Promise kept lock for all of us. The convoy rolled out at last, dust trails merging with the horizon, the network's shadows dispersed like morning mist. Ryder rode with Elias and Caleb in the van now, the engines hum a lullaby of closure. Redemption wasn't a blaze, but a steady burn, honor enduring, family chosen, justice etched in the salt. The flats whispered on, but their silence held no threats, only the echo of vows fulfilled. Thank you for joining us on this journey of silent promises and unbreakable loyalty. If these stories of redemption touch your heart, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We'll ride together for more tales from the Iron Promise.